and welcome into episode 84 of the Stomp the Bus Show. I am your host, Mark Harris, and this time I'm not doing a solo episode. Colton Dodgson has joined me, and in the time since he last joined the show, Colton, it looks like we're rooting for a blue blood basketball school now. Things have changed, it seems.
Yeah, I don't know what that may have been. I know Bobby Hurley seems to have sat up a little bit and really locked in and recognized how difficult the competition's about to get in the Big 12. That kind of seems to be what the sentiment is whenever he speaks. Seems like the last thing I read kind of talked about he wasn't necessarily getting passive or anything in the Pac-12. It's more of an issue of like everybody's aware of how difficult the Big 12 is going to be next year, and Bobby Hurley seems to be very aware with these recruits that he's bringing in. So I don't know if we're necessarily a blue blood yet, right? But we're definitely a little better than we were when we started to shift our thinking to what life would be like in the Pac or the Big 12. So I don't know, maybe a middle of the pack sort of expectation right now, and you can only go up from there.
Totally. Well, I mean, are you referencing the piece done by Craig Morgan on PHNX?
Yeah, when he's talking about the expectations coming into the Big 12 and how good the league's about to be, right? And how good the league has been historically and what you're going to need to do to be competitive in a league like the Big 12. It seems like he is more aware of that reality than anybody seems to be, right? So, I mean, that should probably change in the athletic department. It seems like we're not going to be ghost riding the athletic department anymore, so to speak. But he's really trying to put this team in a position to at least be competitive, right? Which is more than I thought we were going to be able to say when we were going into month 3 without an athletic director. So I don't know, man. Things seem to be turning around on all fronts, which is good.
No, I know I've talked about this on the show, but like where you feel about ASU basketball, right now in late May and early June, here we are now compared to at the end of the season is just, it's such a huge difference. It's cliche to say, oh, it's a night and day difference, but it is. Like, it's just, I mean, that last game against Utah in the Pac-12 not championship game, in the Pac-12 tournament was
right.
a disgrace. It was awful. It was a just terrible game. And there's a part of me that thinks like going to the Big 12 it really spurred action. Like, I mean, kind of like Bobby said, but like, you don't want to get embarrassed again like you did last year. That's a horrible thing to go through as a team, to just not even be competitive in so many games. And so, Bobby somehow, it's been reported that like he knows someone in the entertainment industry, and like this docuseries, which it's still kind of unknown what exactly that's going to be. But in the piece done by Craig Morgan on PHNX, it's saying there's going to be inside access to the locker room and Hurley's going to be mic'd up and all this. He's hustling for this, This isn't a conventional path to get more NIL funds. There's been reporting that it's like, the NIL, like other NIL donors have stepped up. And I think had it just been that, like ASU basketball would be in a better spot than it was at the end of this most recent season, but it wouldn't be nabbing 5-star recruits, 2 of them, And so
Right.
it's just like, it's still, every time I talk about it, it's just kind of like hard to comprehend what's actually happened and like recalibrating expectations, right? Like, at the end.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think for me now the focus shifts to like Bobby has a roster, right? He's had a roster in years past. These are some of the best recruits that he's been able to nab, but he's also been able to get the Bagleys and the Josh Christophers and pair those guys with experience with the guard you thing and all of that other stuff, right? And obviously, world circumstances kind of contributed to, or how much did world circumstances contribute to the underachievement of those teams, right? So while this is all awesome, I think Bobby Hurley has been able to flash as a recruiter in years past, right? He's been able to put some rosters together. This might be his most talented, right? But you also have to juxtapose that with the fact that they will be moving to a much more talented league than the Pac-12 was last year, right? Mm-hmm. Or at least, the Pac-12 had some solid teams, but it's really not much of a competition with the Big 12. I think that we can agree on that. So, you're looking at this and you're like, okay, he has the pieces. That's what all of the offseason talk was about when, his brother's playing for a second national championship in Phoenix. And he's talking about give my brother the tools or whatever, all of those comments that were made. We're talking about, it's a wonder what you can do with resources, whatever it was that he said. Bobby Hurley got a lot of attention for that, right? And the conversation shifted to, is he being given what he needs? Does he have the resources he needs to be successful? And that was definitely a legitimate discussion, given the fact that we didn't have an athletic director and there seemed to be no urgency to find an athletic director and everything like that. So for me, the focus now becomes, all right, I think fans of ASU have been able to recognize, okay, maybe Bobby hasn't had all of the resources. We've talked about that. The stadium isn't, or the arena isn't necessarily where it needs to be. They're moving to Big 12 arenas, all of these other things, right? But now I think the public is aware of that. The national fan base is aware of, like, okay, maybe Bobby's good and he just hasn't had the resources he needs to be successful. Now he does, right? So I think this has to be the season where Bobby gets it done, or relative, right, to ASU expectations. At the very least, this is the season where Bobby needs to be competitive and this team needs to be competitive, which, they have expectations now. Expectations are fun. You hate to go into a season, looking forward to watching a team, or I guess not looking forward, but having the misfortune of watching a team that has no expectations, right? So that's kind of where I'm at with it now. The recruits are great. This roster looks incredible. It seems like he's shifted a little bit, right? The transfer rank is at 59. The composite rank is 4, right? Overall rank at 7 in terms of their 2024 recruiting class. So in years past, it's been bring in the mercenaries. Now it's let's bring in some young blood. Let's bring in these recruits. So we'll see how that focus shifts. You also still have, some transfers. Austin Nunez coming back, obviously Brandon Gardner, BJ Freeman, those guys. So we'll see how it all meshes together, I guess. But this is the season, I think. This is the season where it's like, okay, we've drawn attention to the shortcomings that Bobby Hurley has had to deal with. Now you have the roster. So be competitive, right?
Yeah. Well, for me, the baseline, I'd say, expectation is like, this team needs to be, I think it needs to be a tournament team, honestly. And I think the benefit of playing in the Big 12 is, like, your losses won't hurt you quite as much and your wins will help you because of the competition. Right. And you won't need to go whatever. Like, I think 2 years ago when ASU made it, with the Desmond Cambridge team, made it to the Dayton. I think they won like 22. I think they went like 22-13. If you go 22-13,
they had to beat USC, get to the semifinals of the tournament just to be a first 4 team.
Yes, and that show, and like the thing with the Pac-12 is when you like on paper it looks great that you're playing Cal and you're playing Stanford and you're playing like Oregon State, who's terrible. But the issue is, like, if you slip up in one of those games, it drags all your net rating and whatever, metrics they use to measure teams, it just drags you down so much. And I'm not going to
Yeah.
say like there will be some teams in the Big 12 like that. I'm not saying that. But in college basketball, I mean, we saw it this year with ASU beating Washington State, right? Like a good Washington State team. You can be an average team and beat good teams in the regular season. It's just shot variance, road games, whatever it may be. So if you beat Baylor or something, or you beat Kansas, and I'm not saying ASU is going to do those, but just for an example, like that will help you so much. So for me, I think it's get to the tournament, and I heard some people say like get to the round of 32. Like let's just like it would be great to get to the round of 32. But let's just it's still ASU. Let's get to the
I
tournament.
think, yeah, now that you mention that, I think if this team can get to the tournament, right, you'd have to expect that this is a pretty battle-tested team to have gotten
Yes.
to the tournament, right? I would almost think that making it to the tournament and winning a tournament game, those two things might go hand in hand, which, as crazy as that sounds, the tournament is the craziest postseason, I would say, in sports, right? I don't know if that's much of an argument, with the variance that you get and the Oaklands knocking off the Kentuckys and all of those things.
Yeah.
So obviously you account for that, but
Maybe the NHL playoffs, but yeah. But it's in the same, yeah.
Right, but the the schedule that they would have to play, and the fact that I don't remember the last time we saw this team, maybe in trying to think of what the year was, maybe like 2011, 2012 was the last time this team, and maybe I'm blanking on a year, but the last time this team got to the tournament without having to play in that first four little
So
tournament, right?
I think it was our senior year of high school because they lost to
That's
Texas.
what I'm thinking, because they lost to Texas.
There was that
Right.
meme of the ASU guys on the bench slumped over after a tip in. And then
Yeah, okay.
in
That's what I
the
was
20
thinking of. Yeah.
yeah, the Lou Dort Zylan Cheatham team in 2020 was on track to be a 10 seed, but of course that tournament didn't happen. But yes, your point, it's it's been a long time since they've just cleanly made the tournament,
And I think the reason for that is what you just touched on, is the conference that you're playing in, and those slip ups hurt them way more than a slip up in the Big 12 would. So I think if this team makes the tournament, they're more than likely going to be in as a team in the field of 64, right? They will get a Thursday or Friday game. If they make it that far, I think the expectation should be that you win a tournament game, right? So I think those two things kind of go hand in hand. Obviously, it would be a young team. It's a brand new team with a lot of moving parts. Bobby Hurley's got to figure out how to put that together and make sure this team meshes, right? But there's returners coming back. There's transfers coming in. There's young guys coming in. So there's a lot more talented young guys, right? So there's a lot more moving parts than I think that we've been used to in years past, which is a good thing. That there's more talent on this team than there's been in years past. But putting that together and making it all click in a very difficult conference is going to be the challenge. I would agree with you. I want to see them do that. I want to see them figure it out, and I want to see them get into not the Tuesday or Wednesday game, but be solidified on a Thursday or Friday. Come out and give it the best shot that you can give it after navigating a very difficult basketball conference. They have the talent to do it. Now it's just a matter of putting that together.
100%. I was at a wedding over the weekend with some college friends, and we were talking about this, and we were talking about, it's let's try to be the 7th place team in the Big 12 and a 7 seed, or the 8th place team in the Big 12 and an 8 seed, or something like that.
Why am I not surprised that ASU basketball was the topic of discussion?
Hey, because they're doing well, of course.
Okay. Well, hypothetically.
But it wasn't obviously not the only topic of discussion, but Like,
Okay. All right.
I think those
I'll
are.
pretend like I believe you.
I think though, hey, it's better than what you usually have to talk about with ASU sports. Okay, there's actually some hope. But
That I'll
like,
concede.
but like, anyway, basically like being like a mid-tier seed and finish. No one's saying, oh, you need to be top four in the Big 12. Like that. No one is advocating for that. No one's saying you need to be better than Arizona for the whole season. But you just need to be like a solid, tough out, a team other teams have to like game plan for, and they can't just, expect you to shoot a bunch of contested threes with not good 3-point shooters and never get an offensive rebound or something. Like the
Right.
thing that sticks out with me with this team is their size it's just
Mm-hmm.
upgraded. So you start with the freshman. Jaden Quaintance is a 6'9", 16-year-old center. He could be taller than that this upcoming season. He's a teenager. Um, Amir Ali, 6'8", freshman. Brandon Gardner from USC, barely played at USC. He was a 4-star high schooler. I think he had like an injury or something, but 6'8". BJ Freeman, you get him a power forward from Milwaukee, 6'6". Bashir Jihad, from Ball State, 6'9". So like you just have, and then you still have Sean Phillips. You just
I mean,
have all
even
these
Justin Sanan is
6'5".
6'5"
Yeah, and he
as a
might be the best
shooting guard.
player on the team. Like,
He's gonna be a stud. You're right. Amir Ali 6'8". Like you touched on it, the size is insane, and you still have Sean Phillips coming off the bench, 7-footer, right? Like
yeah.
assume to, I mean, he might be in the starting lineup, whatever it is, but
Adam Miller's 6'4",
yeah,
So it's like, and that matters. But like the team we saw last year, like it wasn't the biggest team, and it's not just like that these guys are tall. It's like a lot of them can, score on the inside, right? Like, I mean, they didn't really have that. They had Jose Perez, and he
hmm
did a decent job. But it's still like because Phillips was just lacking offensively last year, so it's like. They were just limited in that. But now, I mean, the thing is, like, when you bring in 2 5-star guys like that, I know there's a lot of skepticism about, like, oh, like, sometimes the day the 5-star commits is the actual best day of their, run with a given team. But if you're bringing in two, like, there's just better odds, obviously. So, like, um, it's still crazy to see them, uh, like seeing the 24/7 page and they're both there as part of ASU. um, so I mean, it's I haven't been this excited for an ASU basketball season ever.
yeah. No, I agree with you.
Like
I think I was pretty juiced. I was pretty juiced for that Josh Christopher year, but this is like this far exceeds that. So I'm with you on that. Like the excitement for this is, and I hope it's not a letdown. That's all I can say, man. Is I
yeah,
hope I hope it's not a letdown, but we'll see.
it's better. Look, I'll say this: it's better to be like, like, oh, like, yeah, a letdown is a possibility compared to where we were last year. Well, it's like, yeah, I mean, they could hit on all these transfers again like they did the previous year, but you know what I'm saying? Like there was some modicum of hope entering last year, but it wasn't great, you know? And so this year it's like it's still I'm repeating myself over and over on this point, but just I still can't believe we're doing this well recruiting. I still like I heard a lot of because Sonone was committed to U of A, and of course on the
Mhm.
day he commits to ASU, flips. He quote tweets Caleb Love's post of saying I'm returning or whatever. And he was like, oh, that's awesome. And then he just puts out a graphic that's like I'm committing to Arizona State, and like all these a lot of Arizona fans like, oh, he's only going there for the NIL reasons and all this. I'm like, I'm like, oh,
Okay.
okay,
He's
someone's
still
choosing
here.
ASU basketball because of NIL. What world are we
Yeah.
living in where like that's why they're coming here, you know?
Yeah. Definitely. It's an exciting time. Um, Again, it's now they have to play, right?
Of
That's what it
course.
all comes down to is like let's let's see how they perform. I mean, there's still time to bring in more guys, I guess, if there's anybody else on that radar. I'm sure they have to play the scholarship number game if that arrives, but or if that opportunity arises. But either way, man, this is a talented roster, arguably the most talented they've assembled in recent memory. And you're right, a competitive league, a competitive coach, a competitive roster. The expectation should be, I mean, maybe scratch 20 wins. Like I don't think that should be outlandish.
Yeah.
And
And if you
make the
get to 20
tournament with a
wins,
yeah
like you're
with a
probably
roster like get close to it, right? Maybe
yeah.
you land on like 17, 18 and whatever it is, maybe there's some early learning curve, whatever. But the expectation should be I'm right there with you. Make the tournament and clinch a Thursday or Friday game. That would
Yeah,
be my hope.
totally. And also like I'm not I think it's great that like Bobby Hurley's like he clearly is a competitive guy. He's a fighter. Like there's no one denying that. I'm also not here to just like wave off, his coaching concerns. I think like that doesn't mean they're just gonna like it's all of a sudden gonna totally look like a different team. There's gonna be a few frustrating losses scattered throughout the season. Like I don't think Bobby Hurley is gonna just transform into a completely new coach. But I don't think that means like he's gonna, that'll lead to them train wrecking the season or whatever. Like for as much
I
as
completely agree.
yeah, like ASU
I
did make the tournament 2 years ago. It's not like they weren't like some fantastic team, but they did. It did happen. So it's not, and they're a buzzer beater away from getting to the round of 32 that year. So
right.
it's not completely foreign to him.
Yeah, I think one thing we talked about last year a lot too during the season, and I mean the UCLA game comes to mind for me, where they had 4 technical fouls called in that game. You're he's a fiery guy. He has the reputation of being a fiery guy. I think you saw him rein that in a little bit as the season went along. I think he got a little more composed near the end of the season, but you also have to recognize that this is going to be a younger team, right? You're not going to
Yeah.
have these guys who have been in college basketball for 3 or 4 years, whatever it is, and can kind of stay composed on their own. You're going to have guys that are learning it as they go too, right? So I think a responsibility also falls on Bobby a little bit to be a little more even keeled, to be a little more composed, which is not something he's done consistently. And I mean, that's part of him, right? He's a competitive guy. He's a fiery guy. Sometimes it's tough dealing with officials, dealing with calls that you don't agree with. But I mean, if things come unraveled and that costs you a couple of games because you're in 4 technical foul territory again, like that's not something you can't beat yourself, right? Especially in a
Right.
conference like this. So establishing a culture that's a little more, we control the outcome. Don't complain. Don't beg for calls. Do what you can do, and let the chips fall where they may. I think that'll go a long way. Again, it's not like it cost them every game, and you said it. He's proven that he can lead a team to the tournament. He got to the round of 64 2 years ago. It's not that far removed from that, but again, with a younger team, I think his style might need to shift ever so slightly, especially on the sideline.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I mean, there will be some times where he gets a technical, but I mean, of course, like you
Right.
can't have a repeat of the UCLA
Don't
game
let it
last
come unraveled. Yeah, don't let
Exactly.
it come unraveled. Stay
Yeah.
composed. Be who you are, but also have the emotional discipline to recognize where being who you are in that moment might do a little more harm than good, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, totally. Well, it's a good place to be for ASU basketball. I mean, it's been a neglected program by historically by this school. So anytime you're entering into a season where it's like, oh, like it would be disappointing if we don't make the NCAA tournament, right? Like that's a good place to be. So yeah, I mean, last year was just the early season games, like that loss to Northwestern was just an absolute catastrophe. Um, and
Mississippi State was brutal.
that,
That
yeah,
was the first game of the
yeah.
season, but
BYU, you
I
got
mean,
absolutely destroyed. So like, if we see those early in the season, then all bets are off. But
yeah,
that seems
I think
unlikely.
the one thing I'm going to want to look for early in the season is, can this team attack offensively in at multiple levels, right?
Mhm.
I think so often ASU offensively has relied on, okay, who's the hot hand? Find the hot hand. They've earned the opportunity to shoot as much as they want, right? Or
Mhm.
like we saw a little more slashing last year. I know you mentioned Jose Perez. That was great. Adam Miller was fearless. But I just want to see more like play within some sort of system. Take your shots when they're there, but show teams that they have to respect different levels on the court, right? When these guys are hoisting up threes, I mean, the Mississippi State game comes to mind. I think they scored like 25 points in the first half. That's the first half of the season, right? I get that. But that mentality for defenses is like, oh, they're just going to keep shooting these. I guess we can, sag off a little bit, clog the lanes, then you can't slash. You have to play complementary basketball, and that's what I kind of want to see early in the season. Maybe it's not working just yet, right? Maybe they're not a well-oiled machine or anything by any stretch, but at least the attempt, or at least the recognition to play on at multiple levels and try to do something that puts your players in position to be successful. I think that would be a good sign that maybe they're going to figure this thing out. But if you see more of that freelancing stuff that we see a lot, I think that's going to be my biggest cause for concern.
Absolutely. I mean, bad shooters taking a good chunk of threes was a frequent sight in last year's ASU offense, and
Right.
it's going to limit any team when you do that. So, but last
Mm-hmm.
year it's like, well, they just didn't really have like the depth behind there or like the supplement. Like it was like, well, it's something at least, but yeah, no, like that
But that's where I think Bobby's limitations are, right? Is like,
true. Yeah.
and maybe his limitation is, okay, what system can I run? I don't know how to get the most out of the skill set that I have, which maybe that's also an issue. But it just seemed like the system and the offensive philosophy that they adopted last season wasn't really conducive to what those players did best, right?
Mm-hmm.
You had lankier guys, you had slashers, pass first guys. You could have ball movement could have easily opened up, the Perez's and the Adam Millers, but it seemed so often that it was like the first shot, if you have a tiny sliver of room to take it, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of like my cause for concern with Bobby is kind of come up with a philosophy or a system or whatever it is to put these players in a position to be successful. That just didn't happen very much last year. So hopefully, again, this is a long-winded way of saying I hope that there is an offensive philosophy adopted this season that puts these young guys and these players in a position to be successful and play the brand of basketball that their skill set warrants, I guess. So, and it takes Bobby understanding who these guys are and understanding what kind of players they are too. So that's where I think there might be a bit of a feeling out portion of the season. But as long as you're competitive and steps are being made, I think that they're on the right track. So that's what I'll be looking for early on.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's what's great is just that, like, yeah, there's hope, and it's not completely, unfounded. So it's a real good place to
100%.
be, and I'm excited for what we're going to see this year at the Cathedral of Mediocrity this year.
Yeah,
Hopefully it'll be the
hopefully it's the
cathedral of slightly above average basketball this year instead.
cathedral of, yeah, exactly. Cathedral no more.
Exactly. All right, let's switch over to football recruiting a little bit. They've added a few more guys. They're right now, I think they're like 17th in the top, 2025 rankings, which is good. They just added, or number 14. They just added this guy Cameron Dyer, who is he's listed as a quarterback. He's the New Mexico Player of the Year from Albuquerque. He's going to play wide receiver at ASU. And apparently, I didn't know this, but Hines Ward played quarterback in high school, switched over to wide receiver in college.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So like when I first saw like this yesterday, that like we're getting another quarterback in this class. We already have Butter Tollefson, but it's like, oh no, he's gonna be a wide receiver, and like he's 6'4", 202, great athlete. Like that could be a really good under the radar find from this staff. They got this other guy, Corey Butler, from Centennial High School, Corona, California. He's listed at 5'8" and a half, 170, but apparently he's just super fast, great player, 88 overall on 24/7, which that's pretty high for a sub 5'9" guy, So that just shows you what a player he is outside of his height. And then I loved this one. This guy, Mikey Scott from Dallastown, Pennsylvania, another 5'8" receiver. I just love having a player on ASU's named Michael Scott. I just think it's hilarious. Hopefully we can get Dwight
I knew you'd
Schrute on
love
the
that.
offensive line after that. Maybe Jim Halpert at tight end. So
There was somebody, I don't know if it was ASU, but somebody got, what's the name of the guy who's like the executive who always comes in? And I think Michael.
Yeah. David Wallace, and it's spelled
Yeah,
different.
yeah. There was another recruit named David Wallace who recruited somewhere. So it was a big day for office names.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, Michael Scott and Dave, like those aren't like super, like those are, pretty common first names with fairly common last names. So it's not like the craziest thing in the world.
Sorry,
But yeah,
Mark. Sorry, Mark. I was just shining a light on the fact that your show had a big day. All right.
there we go. Well, thank you, Colton.
You're welcome.
And then they got offensive tackle from Duncanville, Texas, Deshaun Bryant. So adding to the class, you have 17 commits, and we are, not even in July. I think that's a great place to be, especially with, this summer, you're not going to be able to recruit every week because of the sanctions. So
Right.
I love this staff. Just get this stuff locked in early. And they're 14th in the ratings. They're not going to finish 14th because you have a lot of teams. I think Oregon's behind. You have a lot of high profile teams that are behind them, but still, like just the fact that you can get it's realistic to finish with like a top 25 class. And that's pretty good. Like that's where that's like a good class, like for ASU, right? Like at the peak of the Herm era, that's what they were reeling in. Todd Graham had some top 25 classes early on. Like that's a good place to be. It doesn't guarantee anything, of course, but it's better than at the end of the Herm era when we were 100th or whatever, and you know lower on the list in the first few years of Dillingham's full classes. So, any 300,000-foot thoughts on the football additions recently?
No, not necessarily. I think it's definitely something that people have looked at and thought, okay, the quantity is the reason why this team is where it is. And while that might be true, I think there's still some quality recruits coming in, right? And yeah, like 2025, we've got 17 current commits. Texas right behind at 10, Tennessee at 10, right? So you're right. They'll probably drop at some point. Still have a shot to finish at that 25, finish in that 25 range. But I do agree that the sanctions are probably playing a role in this, where you want to get as many of these guys as you can before you have to take that break and other schools start to catch you a little bit. But still, it's a promising development. I do like the impact that Hines Ward has made. I know that we talked about, and his name's escaping me, a guy who signed with Oregon. He was killing it recruiting for Samples. He was killing it recruiting for wide receivers, and we discussed the impact that might have and his departure might have, right? And I don't know what kind of difference that has made at a micro level, right? But at a macro level, from a fan's perspective, it looks like Hines Ward has done a great job recruiting wide receivers, right? There's been multiple kids who have come out and said, I chose ASU because how do you say no to Hines Ward? And it's like, that's kind of the impact that I thought this might have, right? Was that wow factor of Hines Ward coming in and telling you he wants to coach you, right? That's a tough proposition to say no to. So that has had an effect, and it's cool to see this team hovering right around that top 25 recruiting mark for 2025. Obviously, for 2024, they're a little further down, but still top 50 for a team that's coming off of a self-imposed bowl ban and all of the other things. The transfers play a big role in that. 29th in transfer rank, but I think that's going to make them pretty competitive in the short term. And then that top 25 class is when you start to see those reinforcements come in, right? So positive developments all around. I think for football and for basketball, right? We just talked about that quite a bit. I always struggle with this when I'm looking at a team that I'm a fan of, and I'm thinking, wow, they might surprise some people, because it's like, of course I'm supposed to say that, but I do think ASU, especially looking at their schedule, can be more competitive than people think that they're going to be because of that transfer class, right? Because of some of the guys and some of the guys coming back, I think Levitt is going to be a little more impressive than people anticipate. Should he stay healthy? Obviously, that's the biggest if with this football team is health. That was the X factor last year. The wheels fell off.
Colton is paused right now, but he's right. Like, the wheels definitely did fall off last year. Don't know what's going on Colton's end. But yeah, no, I agree with his overall point that this team could surprise some people. I don't know to what degree, right? Because to some people, like, winning 5 games might be the surprise. For me, I think if they win 7 games, that would be a surprise. For me, I feel like for a lot of fans, 5 wins is I won't be upset if they win this game amount. I've seen that on Twitter today. Not that like we'd be thrilled with going 5 and 7, but it's a legitimate step forward. And anything below that, like 4 and 8 or 3 and 9, that it just wouldn't feel like enough progress is being made, and it probably means a few blowouts mixed in there as well. So those would not be great outcomes. He just texted me. Let's see. Computer issues, not fun. Yeah. So overall, I think the key takeaway here is that things are at least moving in the right direction in the two biggest programs at this school.